What's going on, Bridging the Gap? It's Roger.
And Cheryl.
And guys, we're just going to do kind of an impromptu video that we hadn't planned on doing. We put this channel together to kind of bridge the gap between the diaspora and the continent of Africa, and to bridge the gap between the past and the present in terms of racial issues and racial tensions. The reason we're doing this video is there was just a court case here in the United States, actually where we live, Dallas, Texas, that had all sorts of racial implications. So we've seen a lot of responses to it, a lot of thoughts, a lot of feedback, a lot of feelings and emotions that are being played out behind this case. So we thought it'd be a good thing to discuss. I mean, if we're going to have this discussion, you got to air these things, got to process through them. And if we harbor them, it just draws people apart and makes people angry. So, let me give a little backdrop of the case. Amber Geiger, for those of you who don't live here in the States, because I know some of you don't, Amber Geiger is a police officer who went home to her apartment, entered into the wrong apartment, and there was a young man by the name of Botham Jean, or Jean, forgive me if I pronounce his name wrong, 26-year-old young man sitting on his couch eating ice cream in his underwear, I believe.
Black man.
Black man. So the police officer's white. They both live in the same complex. She walks into his apartment, and some sort of discussion or argument ensues, which the neighbor heard, who lives across the way. Didn't hear all of it, but heard some of it. So they had this kind of heated argument. She ends up shooting him twice, killing him in his own apartment. So in the trial over the last week or two, she's been talking about how she was fearful that he was going to kill her or hurt her. Or I don't know how you're a cop with a gun on in somebody else's house and afraid, but that was her claim, is that she shot him out of fear, right? So long story short, they went through the trial process and found her guilty of murder, which I really believe is that the first one we've seen where the cop has actually been convicted of murder.
Might be the second one. The one guy that shot the guy running away in his back.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Okay, so we've had two out of all these caught on tape shootings or unjustified, unarmed shooting of black men in America. Two have been prosecuted. This one happened to be in this gentleman's home where he's sitting in his underwear eating ice cream. So they found her guilty, and the jury decided, I guess in Texas, this is something I didn't know either, in Texas, the jury determines how long you're going to go to jail. They determined she was going to go to jail for 10 years, eligible for parole in 5 for murder. So as you hear my voice, there's a lot of questions to all of this. So I want to walk you through it, then we're going to discuss it. So after the trial was over, she's been sentenced. Some unusual things took place. The gentleman's younger brother, who's only 18 years old, took the stand and was expressing, his thoughts towards this young lady, and asked the judge, black lady judge, if he could give her a hug. He went up.
Give the convicted murderer
a hug. The woman who took his brother's life. Can I give her a hug, please? So he gives her this long embrace, tells her he loves her and he doesn't want her to rot in jail, and that he forgives her, right? Then, towards the end of everything, the black female judge gives her a hug and hands her a Bible. And then there was a black court officer who was seen stroking her hair, comforting her. And there's been a lot of discussion around those things. So, where do we start? By the way, guys, this is probably going to be the first time you see me and my wife disagree on some stuff, because as pretty as she is, she's a little militant about stuff. I'm a little more open and well, I won't say forgiving,
No.
but this is affecting her more emotionally than it is affecting me. And there's a lot of different, and here's the crazy thing, and the reason we need to talk about this, because there's no range of emotion that's wrong. None of it is wrong. So let's start with the beginning. She walked into this brother's house, had an argument, and shot him.
And didn't call for help.
Yeah.
Didn't call for help.
Pulled her weapon, shot this man sitting in his underwear before calling for backup.
But no, I'm talking about once he was shot. Making sure that people were coming to try and save his life.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
But she didn't call for help, for assistance, which is what an officer is required to do. If you feel like you may need to pull your weapon, you call for help, for backup. Yeah, she walked into his house, never called for backup.
She was not on duty.
Was not on duty, but she was dressed.
Yeah.
She was off duty, but dressed, I believe. She could have called for backup. She didn't call for backup. I'm just finding out she never called for help. How are you fearful walking into somebody else's house, pulling the trigger? And how disoriented do you have to be to walk into an apartment and not recognize anything in there as yours?
Right. The welcome mat, the furniture he was sitting on, the bowl that he was eating the ice cream out of. I mean, something.
And the mat in front of the apartment, from what I understand, was bright red. Nothing near that outside of her apartment. So that in and of itself is troubling. But she says she was fearful. I just don't understand.
That's their standard line, that they fear for their lives.
Well, that's kind of the standard ground laws in this country. If you fear for your life or you're in imminent danger, then you can actually shoot somebody.
Not if you're black.
Yeah, well,
not if you're black.
Baby, I'm just talking about the law.
Okay.
We know the law doesn't apply to everybody in this country, but the law says that you can do that. She tried to use the stand your ground defense in his home. And apparently, to some degree, it made sense to the jury because we have people in this country for robberies, armed robberies, who didn't hurt anybody, who served more than 10 years. You got people for drug offenses that serve longer time. There may be multiple offenses, but they've never hurt anybody or killed anybody who served more than 10 years. So processing all of this is like she walked into this brother's apartment, killed him, said she was fearful, never called for help, and presented that defense to a jury who must have believed it on some level.
I don't know if they believed it because they found her guilty of murder, which I was shocked that she even got found guilty. But I think they had to work within certain perimeters or certain guidelines in the sentencing, probably. Texas is different.
No, before she got sentenced, they said she could have faced up to life in prison.
Yeah, but what guidelines did they give? Or do they think she...
I don't know the guidelines, but if you're facing up to life, if she walks in 5, that's got to be on the extreme lower end of the guidelines. Yeah. And they're saying she's got 10 years and she can literally walk out of jail, on parole with good behavior and all of that. Potentially in 5 years, she could walk away from a life sentence, or what could have been a life sentence. So on some level, they must have internalized her fear, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I want to flip the script. Well, before we flip the script, let me do this. I want to go now to what happened after the verdict, because there was a lot of stuff that has come out of this young man asking to hug her.
And saying that he forgives her. Mm-hmm.
So, what kind of stuff you've been hearing?
Well, that it's post-slavery, post-traumatic slavery syndrome. It's this, that black people have, for as far back as slavery, have been forgiving their oppressors as a survival mechanism.
Right.
And so they were thinking that it's some residue of that. Now, these people, this...
Almost like we don't value us as much as we value master, right?
Right. But we have to note that the young man that got killed and his family, they aren't African Americans. They are from...
Caribbean somewhere.
Not sure if that matters. I think the whole... when you come from a colonized society, that's kind of
It's all the
the
same
same
stuff.
thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Let's talk about that for a minute. What are your thoughts?
And him forgiving her?
Yeah.
I don't have a problem as much. He needs to do what he needs to do for himself. To, when you forgive someone, that's primarily for you, to not harbor so much hurt and hate and whatever, because that's not healthy. So I don't have a problem with him forgiving her. I have somewhat of a problem of it being done publicly. And part of the reason is because a lot of white people are making such a big deal out of it. Like, oh, he's, this is so great, the forgiveness. But they didn't have much to say about Botham, is that how you say his name? Botham getting shot and killed by a police officer. Those same people were quiet. But now all of a sudden they're defending him, defending his brother about the forgiveness. And I just think it's hypocritical and it's crap.
Yeah.
Now, wait a minute. His mother also said, I read this later, that the mom said, don't take what her son did as a full-on forgiveness for everything that was done. That was for between him and her. So the mom was letting it be known that don't take this as a broad, we forgive everything that's happened. In other words, she ain't there. So I'm going with the mom.
Gotcha. So before I give my feedback on that, I want to touch on what you just said, and that's how white folks are receiving what this young man did, and how he hugged her and embraced her, and how they're, kind of praising that action or that mentality or that forgiving heart or whatever it is that they are praising. I want to flip the script now, and I want to ask, and I want to walk through this whole process and ask, have we ever seen anything like this in reverse? What would it be if a black man, armed, police or not, let's just say he's a cop to keep it consistent, walked into an apartment that was not his own and ended up killing a white woman? Would anybody really believe that he was fearful? Would he get a 5 to 10 year sentence out of a possible life sentence?
He wouldn't have made it out alive.
Right. And what would people be saying if the family members of that white woman asked to hug him? If the judge hugged him? If the court reporters were massaging his back, comforting him, giving him Bibles as the judge did, how would that play out?
It wouldn't play out. That does not happen. And it would not happen. They still haven't forgiven OJ. Just like you talking about other stuff. They're still trying to hang OJ. Get out of here. They don't forgive for stuff like that. And definitely not going to do it in a public setting. It doesn't happen. I can't even imagine. You're asking a question like, what would happen? As you're saying it, I can't even picture it happening in my mind. It just does not happen.
Well, it's never happened.
No.
I've never heard of anything like that. I've never heard of anything like what this young man did in this scenario. But turn that around, and there is no I'm afraid for a black man with a gun. We get shot down without guns all the time. To walk into somebody else's place and try to defend yourself with the stand your ground laws is absolutely
my place.
Absolutely unheard of. I've never heard of anything like that, and he wouldn't have survived that. Being in the courtroom, here's my question: you're talking about how white people are praising what this young man did. Mm-hmm. Would they still praise it if it was reversed?
I don't think so. I really don't think so.
If a white woman had been shot down by an unarmed white woman, been shot down by a black cop, and the family members wanted to hug him and tell him they loved him and they forgive him, would this be getting the same praise that it's getting? And I just
I don't
see that.
Maybe a few, not like this. No. Maybe a few of the people who are truly, you know, God-fearing people, for real, perhaps, but very few.
So let's go to the judge.
That was PTSS for sure. Like, what are you doing?
She means post-traumatic slave syndrome is what she's referring to. So I told y'all she's a little militant. Work with her.
I'm not militant.
I've never seen a judge hug any convicted felon for any reason. And I'm not in courtrooms every day, so I don't know. But that seemed...
The judge is supposed to be impartial.
Yeah, maybe a little unprofessional.
Yeah.
It seemed a little unprofessional to me for her to leave the bench, give this woman a Bible, hug her.
Now, I do think it was probably the atmosphere, since the brother kind of started it off. And, so it kind of... I think it probably made the judge comfortable doing that, but she shouldn't have felt comfortable doing that.
I've never heard of a judge hugging anybody that they just sentenced to prison. So I'm looking at this from just human eyes, right? Because I got another perspective on this. But just in the natural, I've never heard of a judge presiding over a criminal case, murder case, where the defendant is found guilty and convicted and sent to prison, and the judge hugs them. I've never seen that before. And I've never seen court reporters or court officers massaging, rubbing the neck and the back and comforting someone who's crying because they killed somebody and they're going to jail now.
She wasn't crying. She was fake crying. There wasn't a tear coming out of her face when that little clip of video I saw. She was making all the noises and shaking, and it was dry. It was dry.
This is where we disagree. I'm not going to speculate on what's going on in anybody else's heart.
No, I'm telling you what happened with her face. There was no tears coming out of her face.
I can't speak to that because I can't say that I saw that like you saw it. I saw her on the stand crying and whatnot. I don't know if there's...
Did you see the tears?
I didn't look that close, but I can't speak to it. All right. I'm going to take your word on it. Anyway, I don't think we've ever seen those things, but what you're hearing out of the black community is frustration, one, over the sentencing and the amount of time that she got sentenced to. Killing somebody, I mean, it's difficult when we get gunned down by police as often as we do, often on camera, and there's no charge at all. For there to be a charge and it only be 10 years when it's like we can't even sit in our house and eat ice cream. And so there's a lot of anger in the black community. It's like our lives are not worth much of anything to folks, which is why, people don't understand Black Lives Matter. They should say matter too, because they do. But apparently situations like this make it seem like it don't matter much. How do you walk into what can we do where if somebody takes our lives, it's worth more or worth something. This is only the second conviction that we can think of, and it wasn't much of a conviction when she was looking at life. So there's a lot of angry people at the sentence, but I think I heard more feedback on the brother, the judge, and the court officer, and people are frustrated beyond belief that they would go that length to comfort or care for or forgive. I'm trying to think of some of the phrases I've seen online and heard people say. Why do we always forgive or welcome people who hate us, who can't stand us? Why do we do this? Why do we do that? Right? And I want to tie this all back into where we started with the slave dungeons and the religious discussion. And, the church on top of the dungeons and using, the word of God to justify foolishness. In the flesh, looking at this is frustrating. I don't understand why she only got 10 years, probably out in 5. Um, I fully understand people who are upset and hurting to see black folks comfort this woman. If she would have just said, "I messed up," and that's it. But to try to say she was afraid, I think we are so tired of hearing people say they're afraid of us. Mm-hmm. You walked into my house, I'm sitting in my underwear eating ice cream, and that is her defense. And then to see people hug her, give her a Bible, the judge leave the bench, the court officer rubbing her back, black folks are understandably upset. Like, why do we always do this? Why do we always get the short end of the stick? Now, here's the I want to compare and contrast, because there's a drastic compare and contrast here. You have people who built this country who claim to build it on biblical principles, and then you have those who actually believe in biblical principles. This young man operated in a way that I don't even know that I can do, but I can understand where he's coming from. And I think a lot of black folks can't see this, and they blame religion for it, and they blame white people for it. They blame a lot of, how we act based on, they claim to build this country on Christianity, and they ingrained that or indoctrinated that into us. And I don't believe that's what it is at all. We'll get into that much more as we go through this. But this young man operated on principles. First principle, Cheryl already talked about. Forgiveness is for the forgiver. That young brother just freed himself from a life of hatred by letting that go, right? Biblically, the Bible tells us, vengeance is mine, I shall repay. And to pray for your enemies. Pray for those who harm you. Pray. We read these words, but for those of us who are believers in the Word of God, how many of us could practice them on this level? I understand completely where this young man is coming from, but what I saw is something much bigger than the young man, the judge, or the court officer. When you think back to Charlottesville and white supremacy and the racial issues that we have, in this country in particular, but globally, what were they chanting? They were chanting, "You will not replace us. Jews will not replace us," which is funny because they're the same people. We'll get into that later. But they're saying they don't want to be replaced. These white supremacists are afraid that they're going to be replaced. What they are afraid of is reprisal. They're afraid that there's going to be a treating of them, once they become the minority, that they are going to be treated the way they've treated everybody else. Folks, what I saw on the news with the brother, the judge, and the court officer is something that is inherent in us. From our history way back, is that we do know God. We as black people, we are a spiritual people, always have been, but we don't talk about it. We're really about it. And I believe we're living in the last days where things can't get much crazier. We're going to see who truly is in relationship with the Lord and willing to carry out the most difficult task. That we saw Christ carry. We identify with Christ through his sufferings. He was killed by people that unjustly as well. But what he said, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." I saw this young brother emulate that at 18 years old. At 18 years old, he emulated that. And the biggest fear that these folks have, that hate him, that can't stand him, and people that look like him and us, the thing that they fear most is that they're going to be replaced. Here's what I want to say. We have to understand, if that was going to happen, it would have already happened. When you look at the population of the world, 75% of the people on this planet are melanated people. And most of them in places where they've been taken advantage of or abused, or are still being taken advantage of or abused by supremacists, white supremacists. If that was really going to happen, It could happen right now, today, tomorrow. We don't have to wait for the numbers to change. The numbers are already there. That is not who we are. That's not what's in our heart. And I think that's what was on display. But what they do need to understand is there will be a reckoning. As I'm sure this young man said, look, forgiveness is my job, vengeance is up to God. There will be a day where those who think that way will be dealt with. Guaranteed. But I can't knock this brother. I can't honestly say that I would have been able to do it. I don't know. Wouldn't know until I'm there. But for an 18-year-old young man to muster up the spiritual fortitude it must have taken him to tell this woman he loved her and that he didn't want her to rot in jail and that he forgives her. While a lot of black folks see that as mind-boggling and just makes them angry, it was beyond impressive to me. Now the judge, I'm still a little confused about that one. So I've never seen a judge leave the bench to hug somebody, and even the court officer. But I do see a broader display of inherently who we are. If we had that same mindset as the people who have held us down for hundreds of years, don't you know we'd have flipped that script a long time ago? A long time ago, we'd have flipped that on its head. And it can happen tomorrow if we wanted it to. That's just not who we are. But it will be dealt with one day.
Would you say if we were the savages that they think we are?
Right. They present people of color as lesser than them. This is what white supremacists say. We're not as smart as them. We're savages. We're this, gorillas. We're this, that, and the other, right? And if we were that, do you know you'd have been done a long time ago? The numbers are there for that to happen anytime. Globally.
They like us to believe that we're a minority, but globally, we're the majority.
Do the math. 75%. 75% of the Earth's population is melanated people, which is why they feel like they're going to be replaced one day. And here in this country, the reason it's so tense right now is because those numbers are due to change in the next decade or two. Mm-hmm. They know they're going to be the minority, and they fear that we're going to do to them what they've done to us. And that's why I think this gesture from this young man was so big, because it puts on display who we really are. Historically, who we really are. Because if we wanted to, by now, we'd have done something about it globally. And I don't see it happening here in the States. That's just not who we are. God is who God is, and we are who we are. And I think the majority of us have true relationship with the Father, and we know that this will be handled. One way, one day, it'll be dealt with, and it's not up to us to do it. It is our job to live a life of forgiveness, of the kind of compassion that this young man showed, so that we can be whole first and foremost. Because carrying that around in his heart would have damaged this 18-year-old kid for the rest of his life. But once you do that, you set her free. She still got to deal with God.
She still going to have to deal with that judge.
She's going to have to deal with that too, because there's a whole lot more of us in there than there the white folks or folks that look like her. She's going to have to deal with what she's going to have to deal with. But this man did the absolute right thing, and even though I know it's the right thing, I don't know that I could have done it, but I can praise him for having carried that out. So with that, guys, there's really no range of emotions that you could have about this situation, especially if you live in America, that's wrong. For those who are upset at the judge, the court officer, even questioning this young man, I can understand where that would come from. I don't agree with it. I think especially the young man did exactly the right thing to do for him, mm-hmm. and to make sure he walks away from this thing in a healthy place. He did exactly what he should have done. The rest of them may be a little bit suspect, but no matter what you think or what you feel, there's no wrong feeling about this. There's just no wrong feeling.
And I think we can't judge somebody else on how they grieve or how they process their grief. And I think we have to allow him, the brother, to have that. It's just not up to us to judge him about how he's handling it.
No,
he's not responsible for the entire Black community or African American community. I don't even think he's African American. So, he's not responsible for our stuff here and what we're going through in this country. So to put that on him or to,
and that's what bothered me most is
he's only 18.
Why do we always have to be the forgiving ones? And why do we have to, man, leave this kid alone? Yeah. He's 18 years old. He's trying to figure out how to move on from this. Honor his brother and make sure he's in a healthy place going forward. He was
16 when the brother died. Yeah. Was killed. So
young kid.
I'm sure he's dealing with a lot.
I ask you this though, as I ask myself, as I ask my wife, could you muster that? Is your faith in a place where you could deal with a circumstance like that and actually hug that individual who took your family member's life, tell them you love them and you forgive them? Could you do that? I don't know that I could. I pray that I could, but I can't answer that until I'm there.
I don't know if I could that soon.
Yeah, I mean, that's fresh. Still in the courtroom. Yeah. This young man was able to muster the strength to do this, and I think it's something to applaud. I do not think that we should be putting this young man in a position where he feels like he's let down the Black community. Mm-hmm. I think that's a bad idea. Yeah. So I don't even know his name, but kudos, brother. Keep your heart in the right place, because all of this will be dealt with in due time.
I think people are tired of hearing that.
I'm sure they are.
That's the thing, and when you talk about the religion or what people, think that Black people have been brainwashed by religion and stuff, and that's one of the things that is said because, they've been hearing the same thing for a long, long time.
They have. And we've been hearing that, especially Christianity, when you talk about religion, that we've been brainwashed by white people and that's a white man's religion. Okay, we're going to examine that as well. There's a lot of stuff that we've been hearing. We're going to examine the truth of it and the facts of it. Bottom line is, if the Messiah is who he is and I know him to be, it'll be dealt with. It always is. Everything has a time and a season, and we're going to prove to you that this too has a time. It is coming to an end. And that ain't something we got to handle on our own. It's actually best if we don't, because we'll just mess it up. But everything has a season. This will not last forever. As hard as that is to hear for us in the Black community, especially in America, this will not last forever. And we're going to show that to you as we go through on this journey. Anything else, babe?
Nope.
All I want to say in conclusion is keep discussing the topics. Regardless of what your feelings are, what your emotions and thought processes are, you got to talk through this stuff or it will eat you up. Mm-hmm. You got to get it out. You got to work through it. Whatever comments you guys want to put on the page, I'm sure there will be some that I disagree with, some that I agree with, and she'll probably be quite opposite on each and every one of them. But get it out. Talk it out. Let's work through this thing, because that was a pretty intense scenario. To actually have her go to prison is a victory, but it for a lot of people doesn't feel like a victory because she got such little time. And then we see these people hugging on her and loving on her. It's like, man,
what's the use of punishing if we're going to forgive? I think that's part of the,
that's how we feel.
If they're going to forgive us, so let's just keep, doing whatever.
That's how a lot of Black folks feel. I don't see it that way. She don't have to deal, man. Look, well, I'm not going to go into.
We're supposed to be closing out, right?
Yeah, we're supposed to be closing out, so I'm not going to go into personal experiences. Look, just because people appear to be getting away with something or appear to be getting a minor punishment for a major crime, guys, trust me when I tell you, when God says he's going to handle up, he's going to handle up. But here's what I will say. His mercies endure forever. He loved me for years, for a decade in my disobedience. After he first told me what he wanted from me, it took him a decade. Then he dealt with that. Then he showed me who he was in my life by dealing with things that really I created. And he did so in a time frame that if anybody told me it was going to take that long, I said, I can't make it. I ain't going to be able to do it. It took longer than I thought, but once it was done, done. When he says his mercy lasts forever, he's going to give people opportunities. You never know. That Bible that was given to this young lady by the judge, seeing that young man get off the stand and come hug her, that may change her entire life. God is always trying to get to the heart, and it don't matter what color you are. These folks may have opened a doorway, a pathway for God to reach her heart. We just don't know. But if there's no change, if there's no repentance, there is no forgiveness without repentance. If she don't get her act together, he'll deal. He always does. Guaranteed, like clockwork. So I don't worry about those things. I know we in the black community feel a lot of pain behind these scenarios happening so often, and we just want somebody to get life in prison. Give us one.
Want them to get theirs.
Right. We want them to get theirs. And the time is coming. There will be times when we say theirs, we don't mean all white people.
No.
We mean these scenarios, these circumstances, these white supremacists. It's like, okay, how long is this going to go on? It's going to go on, but when it comes to an end, it's going to come to an end. And I wish I could say more, but we don't have all night to be on this video tonight, and that will be a long conversation, but we are going to get there through this journey. I'm going to show you exactly what I'm talking about. There will be an end for this, and there's a time, an appointed time for it to end. With that, again, have the conversations, talk through this stuff, don't bottle it up because it'll mess you up, and that's not what we're here for. We're hoping that we can create a dialogue, a place for people to vent and to discuss these things and to work through whatever you might be feeling behind it, because nothing you're feeling can be wrong at this point. Anything else? All right, you guys have a great Sunday, and we will talk to you soon.
Bye.